What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we are recapping the last round of SEC spring games from over the weekend. Should Arch Manning be QB1 at Texas?
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. On today's show, we'll run through the remaining 5 SEC spring games from over the weekend, and we'll get to some of the other news around the conference. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And by the way, this episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is helping you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we are recapping all the spring game action from over the weekend, and we're going to start over at Austin, Texas with one of the new members, the Texas Longhorns. And I posed the question, are we sure the Longhorns should be rolling with Quinn Ewers at quarterback and not Arch Manning? In his most extended college action we have seen thus far, and I get it, it's a spring game, Arch Manning put on a show in the orange and white game on Saturday through a 75-yard touchdown pass on his first passing attempt, started the game 10 for 10 passing, and finished the first half 11 of 13 for 189 yards with 2 touchdowns. His first incompletion came with 12 seconds left in the first half. And his second came on a throw off the hands of Isaiah Bond in the end zone. Arch Manning finished today 355 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, while completing 19 of 26 attempts. And according to the metrics, 4 of those incompletions were catchable passes. Look, I'm not trying to start the Arch Manning hype train here, but he looked calm, he looked poised, he looked the part. And when you consider that, the incumbent starter, Quinn Ewers, has missed 5 games in the past 2 years due to injury, reality is we're going to see Arch at some point. And speaking of Quinn Ewers, he played sparsely in this one, but most notably, he threw an interception on his first pass of the game off a deflection from Ethan Burke that allowed Alfred Collins to haul it in, and he returned it for a pick 6 in the game's opening score. So it was just a little bit more magnified. Sark said the plan all along was to limit Quinn Ewers to 1 or 2 series because he is the entrenched starter, but I ask, is that the right move? I mean, we mentioned Quinn Ewers missed games due to injury, but he's also been prone to mistakes. That OU game last year, the biggest rivalry game of the year for Texas, he was bad in that one early on. Threw a couple interceptions that put them behind the 8 ball. And he was just kind of okay in some other games last year against Texas Tech, Kansas, TCU, Houston. And then, of course, we can't forget the abysmal showing in the Sugar Bowl playoff semifinal against Washington. I was there, and Ewers was just off that night. I mean, he completed just 55% of his passes, just 1 touchdown. Most of his passing yards came late in the game. But I'm just posing the question, is it the right decision to be sticking with Quinn Ewers as the starter? Or at least should Sark say, at least we're going to call it an open quarterback competition? I mean, this isn't just some good quarterback recruit. We're talking about a member of the Manning family here. After the spring game, Sark was asked about Quinn Ewers. He said, look, I know what Quinn's about. Quinn's had a great spring. In parentheses, outside of that bad pick. As for Arch, Sark said, I wanted Arch to be able to just go play some football. He hadn't really played in a year. It was good to see some of the guys around him play with him the way that they did. We're very fortunate at the quarterback position to have a third-year starter in Quinn and to have a backup, the backup that we have. Now, Sark told Chris Lowe of ESPN that Arch Manning has been patient, despite his famous last name and the proliferation of quarterback transfers around the country. Guys want to hit the transfer portal and all that. Arch has said and done all the right things, but it was an incredible showing. And look, the fans love Arch. They went nuts when he got into limited action last year. I just wonder, man, first sign of Quinn Ewers' trouble this year, fans are going to be calling for Arch. They want to see him. While Manning was the story of the day, third-string signal caller Trey Owens had a nice performance. His Orange team actually won the game 35-34. Owens connected with true freshman wide receiver Ryan Wingo for a beautifully thrown end zone fade. Owens went 14 of 21 for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns of his own. Some other takeaways from the Texas spring game. Had some questions about the Texas wide receiver room, right? They're losing A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Jonte Cook looked really good. Isaiah Bond, DeAndre Moore. Like I said, the 5-star freshman Ryan Wingo looks ready for prime time. And then don't forget, they bring in Matthew Golden from Houston, Silas Bolden from Oregon State. This wide receiver course should be really good for Texas. Running back C.J. Baxter runs really hard, former 5-star running back. He looks ready for the SEC. And then defensively, some big plays by Ethan Burke, Alfred Collins on the D-line. They've added Trey Moore, of course, big-time pass rusher from UTSA. Colin Simmons, true freshman, 5-star. Looks like he could shine very early. And then the secondary looks pretty solid. Malik Muhammad back there, Terrence Brooks. But we will see if Quinn Ewers is SEC ready. Keep in mind, Texas doesn't start SEC play until September 28th when they host Mississippi State. After that, the big test is going to be when the Georgia Bulldogs come to Austin on October 19th. But they'll also get Oklahoma on October 12th. And speaking of the Sooners had their spring game on Saturday. They took the field for their annual red and white spring game, and things look different. There were no signs of the Big 12 on the field or around the stadium. The flags flying in the south end zone used to have all the Big 12 teams. They were now red and white pennants. No Big 12 logos on the jerseys as well. It was a new age in Norman. But we got our first glimpse of Brent Venables' club as they head into year 3 under his leadership and year 1 into the SEC. They went offense versus defense for 4 12-minute quarters. A little bit of an interesting scoring system. Wanted to spruce up the spring game scoring, but the final was a 65-58 win for the red team. It was sealed with a late rushing touchdown by walk-on running back Chapman McCown. But the highlight of the day, first drive of the game, quarterback Jackson Arnold throwing a 64-yard touchdown pass to wide receiver Dion Brooks. Jackson Arnold threw for 233 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game. But look, if you're buying stock in an Oklahoma player, how about the wide receiver Dion Brooks? He's a transfer out of Purdue. He looks like a star in the making. He'd been a standout throughout their spring practices, but he was electric in this one. In the first half, hauling in 5 passes for 174 yards and a pair of touchdowns. The 2 touchdowns went for 64 yards and 50 yards. And for being just 5'9", man, he's got the speed and athleticism in the open field that are going to make secondaries really have to pay attention to him. And we kind of got a glimpse of how they're going to use him. You know, some people have compared him to Drake Stoops, who Oklahoma used in the slot last year and had almost 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But they said Stoops had only a handful of deep targets last year. It's clear they're going to throw the ball deep to Dion Burks. And you combine that with Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson at wide receiver. I mean, they got some weapons there for Jackson Arnold and company. But in the backfield, running back Gavin Sawchuk, he ran for a 1-yard touchdown. He's their returning rusher who had 744 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns last season. O-line, there was a lot of concern surrounding Oklahoma's offensive line. They had to replace every regular starter from last season's starting unit. Their starting 5 on Saturday looked pretty impressive. They held their own, and that included USC transfer Michael Tarquin and North Texas transfer Fabechi Nawawu, I guess is how we'll say it. But no, I mean, offense looks good. The big question with Oklahoma is defense. And they wanted to keep things pretty vanilla in this one with it being a spring game. And Zach Alley, his first spring as defensive coordinator. And they had a couple of key players out, like their stud safety, Billy Bowman. But defensive tackle Grayson Halton, he was impressive, leading the starting unit on the interior. Then you had senior Ethan Downs. He was very productive in the first half. Both of those guys had sacks against the second-team offense. Linebacker Jaron Kanik had 5 tackles. Danny Stutzman had 3 as well. And look, while Jackson Arnold was just 10 of 20 passing, it looks like the offense is going to be really good. And if that defense can get some stops, force some turnovers, Oklahoma may be better this year than some are expecting. A lot of people kind of putting them at about a 7-win over-under. If Jackson Arnold can connect with these receivers consistently, they are going to be a problem for some teams and win some games that they're not supposed to. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to hit on the other games of the week, including A&M, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. All that is coming your way here in just a sec. Well, first, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for that role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional at LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to spend on the hiring process. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, diving back into it. Locked On SEC. I want to remind you guys, Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. You can find the ultimate 6-episode series of Locked On NFL Draft. Hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, live reactions from local college football experts, and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's dive back into it as we are reacting to the final SEC spring games over the weekend. And now we head out to College Station, Texas, where we got to see old Conner Weigman and Mike Elko making his, I guess you'll say, coaching debut. It's a spring game, but the annual maroon and white spring game over there in College Station. And look, this was the first game I watched on Saturday, and let's be real, it was a little boring. There was not a lot of scoring. Defense dominated early. There were a bunch of incomplete passes, a lot of tackles, hits. Some decent runs in the run game, but passing game got going eventually, and wide receiver Noah Thomas is emerging as perhaps A&M's best wide receiver. He was a little bit quiet last year in the receiving game, but a lot of people think he can be that guy. He caught 2 touchdowns in the maroon and white game on Saturday. After the game, Mike Elko said, look, Noah has tremendous size, a very large catch radius. I think he's getting healthy. He had some offseason stuff he was dealing with. But he said, I think he can develop if he can develop some strength and get his body where it can possibly be. Yeah, I think Noah has all the makings of being a guy that we can use as a top target. Now, look, they have some holes have opened up, right? Evan Stewart transferred out. Anaya Smith is off to the NFL draft. So they're looking for that go-to wide receiver. A&M has not had a 1,000-yard receiver in a single season since Josh Reynolds back in 2016. But the good thing is they got some quarterbacks. And as for quarterback, we all know Conner Weigman is the slated starter. Jalen Henderson started some games last year. Marcel Reed made some nice, exciting plays in this one. As far as passing goes, Conner Weigman was just 5 of 14 for 47 yards. But Mike Elko said after, look, there's not a lot of programs across the country that have 3 kids that can go out there and operate an offense effectively right now. And it's a luxury to have the 3 kids that we have. Marcel Reed threw the first touchdown pass of the game for the Maroon team, finding Noah Thomas. Thomas would again connect with Jalen Henderson on a score, but Marcel Reed would throw for 84 yards on a score. Jalen Henderson would throw for 100 yards on a score. And Marcel Reed showed off his mobility and accuracy as well. The running backs look pretty good. Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens both ran for touchdowns. But the story of the day for A&M defensively, former Purdue edge, big number 11, Nic Scourton. This is a guy you want to keep an eye on. He looks like the Aggies' best player overall going into the fall. They credit him with 5 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for a loss, and a pass breakup. By comparison, junior Shamar Stewart, he had 7 tackles, a sack, and a tackle for a loss as well. Linebacker Scooby Williams comes over from Florida. And in this game, they lined him up at times as a weak side backer or overhang defender. And he's got that sideline to sideline range. He can run down running backs Finished the day with 5 tackles and a pass breakup. And, of course, next to him, you got Torian York, who just, has been a playmaker ever since he stepped on campus there at A&M, and he's looking for an even bigger role this year. He had 5 tackles, filling in those gaps against the run. But Scourton, active all day long, like we said, the 3.5 sacks, and that didn't even include the times he appeared to have a clear path to Conner Weigman. Threw his hands up. So, one stat book had him with 2.5 sacks, another one had him with 3.5 sacks, whatever it was. Dude was getting after it. And, even one time he beat Weigman to the edge, forced him to throw a ball into the dirt. So there's definitely reason to get excited about Nic Scourton in College Station. Keep an eye on number 11. I think he is going to have a big, big fall there with this Aggie defense. And, Mike Elko knows a thing or two about defense. You don't think he's going to put this kid in spots to make an impact? Going to be a lot of fun to watch. All right, next up over at South Carolina, there were not a ton of offensive fireworks in South Carolina's annual spring football game. A 17-0 win for the Garnet over the Black. But both offenses were strong with their top units out there. LaNorris Sellers, that's who everybody wanted to see, the big quarterback, opened the game by leading a touchdown drive down the field, completing 2 third-down passes and scrambling for 2 first downs. He ended the drive 4 for 4 passing for 38 yards. With 27 yards on his scrambles, capped it off with a 13-yard touchdown run. And look, he stepped up into the pocket through pressure, found the corner of the end zone on the touchdown pass. I like LaNorris Sellers, right? We saw a little bit of him last year, and there's reason why Gamecock fans are excited about him. Now, Robby Ashford, he took over afterward, made some plays with his legs, led the Black offense down into the red zone. The drive did stall out there. Brian Thomas and Gilbert Edmond had sacks, and Alex Herrera missed a 55-yard field goal. But both Sellers and Robby Ashford played the entirety of the 24-minute first half. Sellers went 9 of 11 for 70 yards and 38 yards rushing. And Shane Beamer isn't naming a starter yet, but it's clear this is Sellers' job to lose. We've got to look at some of the other pieces on the offense as well. Got to see some of the new running backs. Defensively, Dylan Stewart, the big 5-star freshman defensive end, he was as advertised, wreaking havoc throughout the spring game. Had a tackle for a loss on the second quarter a screenplay in the second quarter. But Thomas Jr. was maybe the standout of the night with 2.5 sacks off the edge. In the secondary, redshirt freshman DB Vakari Swain, he had the first takeaway of the night. True freshman quarterback Dante Reno rolled out of the pocket on a 4th and 1, tried to squeeze in a pass to Nick Elksness, and Swain made the play. But pretty ugly second half overall for the Gamecocks, but all fans wanted to see Sellers at quarterback. The O-line still a work in progress. Like I said, run game needs a little bit of work. Jawad Howard, DJ Braswell, Oscar Attaway. We got our first look at some of those guys, but we know the Gamecocks have a brutal schedule. A road trip out to Kentucky hits them in week 2, right out of the gates. And lastly, our last spring game, it was Mississippi State. Look, I'll say this. I enjoyed watching Mississippi State spring game. They opened the Jeff Lebby era at Davis Wade Stadium on Saturday, and it didn't take long to see why they hired him. He's an offensive guy. Offense cruised to a 67-53 victory against the defense. It was custom scoring, right? Defense got points for doing certain things, but defense held the early advantage. And then quarterback Blake Shapen, the transfer from Baylor, he flipped that very quickly. He only played in the first half, completed 18 of his 22 passes for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns. Former Louisville receiver Kevin Coleman made a big play early in this one, and then Shapen connected with the former UTEP receiver Kelly Akharaiyi on a 40-yard touchdown in the first quarter. Backup quarterback Chris Parson made some plays. He went 7 for 13 for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns, threw a 65-yarder to freshman receiver Mario Craver. And Craver led State's receivers on the day, 5 catches for 86 yards. Akharaiyi had 86 yards and a score. And Mississippi State was without their receiver Creed Whitmore, who was moving around on a scooter, had his right ankle taped up. So Craver filled in the slot there They also used the tight ends. Justin Ball, a transfer tight end from Vanderbilt. He caught a pair of touchdown passes in the first half. Running back was interesting. Johnny Daniels led the way with 6 carries for 64 yards. I like Jeffrey Pittman a lot. He had 10 carries for 58 yards and a score. It's a new day in Mississippi State and Starkville, right? I mean, their first team offensive line is made up mostly of all transfers. McKalen Pounders from Memphis, Jacoby Jackson from Texas Tech, Marlon Martinez from LSU, Ethan Miner from North Texas. It's just all new guys. And then defensively, Bulldogs made some plays. They put some pressure on the quarterback. Tyler Woodard had a forced fumble at the goal line. Brandon Jennings, Dontarie Russell, DeMonte Russell all had a sack. It was good to see former Gamecock linebacker Stone Blanton holding it down at one of those linebacker spots. But I'm a little bit concerned. If I'm looking at this Mississippi State team, I'm excited about all the new pieces they have. And it's a hodgepodge of all new pieces. You're going to need to buy a program your first game at Starkville this year to get used to all the new names. But I'm a little bit concerned about that defense. You lose guys like Bookie Watson, Jaden Crumity, Nathan Pickering, Jed Johnson, DeCameron Richardson. There's a lot of holes to fill, and I don't know if they have enough guys to fill them. But like I said, offense will be exciting with some of these new pieces they bring in, like Blake Shapen at quarterback, like Kevin Coleman at wide receiver. Could be fun to watch Mississippi State this year. It's a brutal schedule. Over-under win totals about 3 or 4. Nobody's expecting them to win. So Jeff Lebby gets a little bit of a transition year to, hey, let's do some exciting things and let's let it all hang out. Let's see what we can do. So there you have it. That's our spring game recap. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. When we return, Ole Miss making a big pickup at running back in the transfer portal. We'll talk about that in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you guys this episode presented to you by friends over at FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball, of course, is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from home runs to slap shots, slam dunks, whatever it is, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Go check them out. It is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Go make your first bet an automatic win. Like we said, NBA action happening basically every night of the week with the NBA playoffs going on right now. So many games. Of course, you can even get in on some prop bets for the NBA or the NFL draft. That's coming up later this week. So tons of different things you can get in on. It is FanDuel. They are America's #1 sports book for a reason. That website, one more time, it's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Go take advantage of that $150 in bonus bets they are offering. FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC, and as we dive back into it, we recap all the spring game action. We're done with spring games. Vandy didn't have one, everybody else did, so we recapped all of those. We added 2 new schools to the mix. So we did Oklahoma and Texas today. We talked about Arch Manning Mania. So let's dive back into it as we discuss one of the big storylines that happened over the weekend, and that was the Ole Miss Rebels picking up a dynamic playmaker in the transfer portal, a running back by the name of Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. It's hyphenated. He started his career at Alabama State, spent last season at New Mexico, had one of the best seasons ever for the Lobos at running back. He had initially committed to Arizona in February, but on Friday evening, he announced, I'm going to be an Ole Miss Rebel. Last year at New Mexico, he rushed for 1,190 yards, averaged 6.3 yards per carry, 17 rushing touchdowns. Finished the year with a couple of 200-yard performances against Fresno State and Utah State. Look, Ole Miss has had a big hole there with Quinshon Judkins leaving, and they could say all they want. They have faith in the guys that are there, and I do think they can get some production out of the running backs that are currently on the roster. But they needed somebody else to join the mix of Ulysses Bentley, Kedrick Oscano, and Logan Diggs. Transferred in from LSU. He's banged up. Don't know when he'll be ready. But certainly, Croskey-Merritt going to add a big-time playmaker there. Now, Henry Parrish Jr. recently hit the portal at Miami. There are a lot of people linking him to Ole Miss. There were even reports that he was back at Ole Miss, and it was happening, but haven't heard confirmation on that yet. But we do know that Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt from New Mexico is heading to Ole Miss, And that's a big time running back there to add to the mix back there. All right, a few other tidbits here. Stuff happened over the weekend. Over at Auburn, they lost another receiver to the transfer portal. Third-year wideout Jay Fair put his name into the transfer portal, leaves the Tigers after 2 seasons. The 5th Auburn receiver to transfer out of the program since December. Look, they're looking for a different mix of guys, and certainly they've addressed that, bringing in Robert Lewis, Sam Jackson, Cam Coleman, of course, the big-time freshman. So you lose Jay Fair, but go ask any Auburn fan. Is it a big loss? They like the guys that they have. All right, over at Texas, we know Texas and Michigan are going to be playing in week 2 of next season. The Longhorns and Wolverines will begin a home-and-home series. This one will be in Ann Arbor, inside the Big House, and they have set a date and a time. Saturday, September 7th. It will air on Fox, and Fox confirmed the big noon kickoff will be live from the showdown. The game is set for a 12 Eastern, 11 a.m. kickoff. So, kind of sucks. I mean, look, you hate that Fox picks up some of these games, but, there's a reason why Texas jumped into the SEC. We want all the rest of our games on ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, or SEC Network. But, they got to go play it on Fox, and they got to go play the stupid big noon, 11 a.m. Central kickoff. Have fun with that one. All right, over at South Carolina, they picked up a recruiting win over the weekend. Shamari Eels, 4-star prospect, one of the top corners in the country out of the state of Virginia. He committed to Shane Beamer and company. 6'2", 180 pounds, rated as the 15th cornerback in the country, a number 4 overall player out of the state of Virginia. This is for the class of 2025. So not going to be next year's class, but the one down the road. Had one other tidbit in here. I wanted to throw this in. NCAA has officially announced a pair of significant rule changes for next season. If you missed it, they approved the wearing of helmets and the communication devices there. No big deal there. But they also approved a 2-minute warning at the end of both halves. So decision to add a 2-minute warning comes a year after the NCAA changed its rule to no longer stop the clock after first downs, except in the final 2 minutes of each halves. So this basically provides an update on all that. Clock keeps running until the 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning, clock will stop. We'll get a 2-minute warning, and then subsequently the clock will stop after every first down that occurs inbounds in the remaining 2 minutes. And lastly, before we get out of here, I want to give a shout out to LSU Gymnastics. After being the runner-up on 4 different occasions and making deep runs every year, LSU had never won a national championship in gymnastics. Well, they won their first one on Saturday in front of a crowd of 7,600 people at Dickies Arena. Tigers earned the highest score in Thursday's semifinals. They led for the first 2 rotations on Saturday, but they fell behind Utah ahead of the final event. But the team closed the deficit on the beam. Aaliyah Finnegan, the team's final performer, stuck her dismount and hugged her assistant coach, sobbing, and they realized she had done enough. Earned a 9.95 to give the team a final score of 198.225, putting them ahead of second place Cal. Utah, by the way, they struggled on the vault. They fell to 3rd place after leading. And the Florida Gators, they finished 4th in their showing. LSU coach Jay Clark said he was speechless after taking home the trophy. But, hey, Livy Dunn, she gets a title. And how about that? LSU in the last calendar year, they won a championship in women's basketball under Kim Mulkey. They win a championship in baseball under Jay Johnson. Now they win a gymnastics championship under Jay Clark. And Paul Skeens, the starting pitcher from LSU's baseball team, dating Livy Dunn on the gymnastics team. And now they both get championships at LSU. Hey, no pressure, Brian Kelly, but LSU starting to mount up all these championships. Been a while since football's had one. In fact, been a while since Joe Burrow and Coach O were on campus winning that one. So no pressure, but you may want to start winning championships. LSU's winning championships in all these other sports. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers coming back tomorrow on the show. We'll be talking more SEC football, the latest there. And a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today. Go find it, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.